Hi friends, it's Adam, the crippled cannabis cowboy. Thanks for watching another one of my Crips and Buds videos. I'm a cripple and I like buds of cannabis. This is kind of about what I do, what I've been doing, and I don't know, maybe it helps you. If it helps you or someone you know and actually helps like a smoker start to grow, that's a big help, man. Growing this plant is tremendously zenful when it comes to growing this plant. If you want to get started, that is cool. Finish a plant from start to finish. Don't do nothing to it and see what the hell it does. It's a big help. I did it myself and I recommend anybody else do it. Cause that'll kind of show you what's needed, what happens, and time frames that you can experiment with. That's kind of what the video is about, is experimenting. Don't be afraid to experiment. In this community, there's a lot of good people in this community, but there's also a lot of shit talkers. And no matter what you do, no matter how awesome your plant looks, there's always going to be someone that thinks it's not good enough, or it needs this, or this should have been done. There's nothing you could do about those kinds of people. As you start to experiment, there's many different worlds you can experiment with. You can experiment with mixing soils. You can experiment with the different kinds of stress training. You can experiment with light times and humidity, and oh my goodness, there's so many things you can experiment with, and I actually recommend it. I have my own experimenting situations, and because of that experimenting, I found my way. That's kind of why I recommend experimenting with things, is because eventually you will find something that works for you, something that works for your time frame, for your schedule. You know, I'm crazy disabled, so I can't even freaking go nowhere. I'm not allowed to drive, so all I could do is focus on growing these beautiful plants. Now I've bought plenty of bags of soil, and that's like the easiest method. Just go get a bagged soil of something that's good, then you're gonna grow a plant from start to finish. Eventually you will get tired of the old dirt and throwing it away and spreading it out in your yard or whatever it is you do to it. I decided to reuse my old dirt and it works, and I actually recommend what I do. I've been using something called Craft Blend from Build a Soil. Thanks, Jeremy. He actually kind of gave me the heads up. I've called a couple times. I've talked to their customer service. Great customer service, by the way. And they kind of steered me in the right direction on how to use Craft Blend. And to make it simple, after you use your soil and you're tired of it and it's sitting there just collecting dust, you can take that soil, make sure it's well mixed and there's nothing in it that's bulky, or there's no like giant root masses in there. Typically, to keep it simple, take a 5-gallon bucket. Don't matter if it's fabric or plastic or whatever. Take a 5-gallon bucket of my used dirt and I'll put in almost a cup of Crop Blend. I'll mix it right in with the soil. I have like a sweeping, like a broom handle, and I'll spin it around with a broom handle, whatever. It is tough in a 5-gallon bucket to do your mix. I recommend you mix it up in a much larger thing or whatever. And I just take my old dirt and I mix in almost a cup of Craft Blend, and that is for a 5-gallon bucket. You don't want more than that or less than that. I don't really know. I haven't experimented with those things. And that was like, that's an easy method. I've grown plants with this particular recipe, if you call it a recipe. I also use cropland as like my top dress. Like whatever soil I get the plant going in, after it's been in a 5 gallon pot, about like 3 weeks to a month, it's time for a top dress. Gotta eat. So I'll take a cup of cropland and put it on top of the plant, just under a cup for a 5 gallon. If I'm using a 7 gallon, 1 cup seems to do just fine. Whether it's new soil, old soil, my own super soil I mix, after it's been in a 5 gallon pot for a month, and this is like a normal sized plant, not like some little one. It needs to eat. Typically, I'll top dress it with the cropland about 3 weeks into a bigger plant in a 5 gallon pot. It takes a little while to break down. That's why I top dress like at week 3, so it's got like a week or 2 before it's really broken down and the nutrients are provided. Then there's the super soil recipes that I use. And wild, but I have this shit memorized. I'll take a 5 gallon bucket, ProMix HP. Now, mind you, it is tough to do just in a 5 gallon bucket. I recommend mixing it up in a bigger bucket. But you will take a 5 gallon pot's worth of peat moss. ProMix HP is what I use. And then I will mix in to a 5 gallon pot 6 tablespoons of bat guano, 1.5 tablespoons of kelp, 1.5 tablespoons of crab meal, 1.5 tablespoons of fishbone meal, and 1.5 tablespoons of alfalfa meal. And that soil does fine for me. That's what I planted plenty of plants in. As it grows and it gets big enough, then it's time to top dress it with the cropland. And I've done that plenty of times. That seems to be the best working so far. And like I said, I'm experimenting and trying other shit too. The other recipe I have used and grows fine plants is, once again, in a 5 gallon pot. I would mix ProMix HP, and in that I would put 10 tablespoons of 444, 10 tablespoons of kelp, 10 tablespoons of alfalfa meal, and 5 teaspoons of langadinite, if I said all that properly. That's the recipe I'm following, and just to kind of make it simple, you don't gotta figure this shit out. Just find something that someone else has done and copy it. And as you copy it, you're gonna find your little niche and your little twist where you can make it your own way. No matter what I mix up, what recipe I'm using, what I'm doing, they always get a top dress of something. Whether it's cropland, whether it's something else. There is something called build a flower, and I'm experimenting with that now. I don't know the results of it, but I didn't know much about it. It really works kind of just like cropland. You sprinkle it on the top, or you can mix it in or whatever. I actually called the company and talked to their customer service, their staff, and they've been a big help. And I'm going to be experimenting with this build a flower, and I'm going to be experimenting with this build a flower and cropland combined, and there's several other things I'm going to be using. So that's something you can do for yourself, for experimenting. Don't be afraid of experimenting. That's how we learn. Yeah, you're gonna fuck up. Yeah, you're gonna do something wrong. That's why I recommend a backup. Have a backup plant. That way you have one that's doing one thing and one that you're experimenting on another. And when I experiment, I give it about 2 weeks. Then I look at it. The next day you ain't gonna see shit. 2 days later you ain't gonna see shit. Well, maybe you will. But for me, I give it 2 weeks. So on my schedule, like say I made the soil and it's growing, and I pay it no mind really. I just treat it like a normal plant. After 2 weeks, that's when I assess what I have done. How is this experiment working? How fast is this plant growing? Then the other avenue that I experimented with, and it was the time frame and like whatever soil you use or whatever. And if I get the plant growing, I'll let the plant, once I plant it, gets like 2 weeks, then I'll top it, then it gets 2 weeks, then I'll super crop it, then it gets 2 weeks, and I'll top it again, then it gets 2 weeks. I seem to have this 2 week thing, so it works for me. I actually have a system that I follow right now where my favorite is making my own super soil. I will plant, if it's a seedling, it's a month. That's it. Right off the rip, it's just a month in seedling stage. That's what I follow. Sometimes plants grow very vigorously, so it might only be in the seedling phase or seem like it is for maybe 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Then I'll take it out. Once it leaves my seedling bin, it goes on a time frame. And when it goes into its first pot and day one of veg or whatever, 2 weeks later is when I do my first stress, whether it's topping, whether it's bending over, whether it's super cropping, or whatever I decide to do. I give the plant 2 weeks for the roots to kind of like anchor themselves in the soil. So it gives me plenty of, I guess, stability to play with the plant. Then I'll give it 2 weeks. After about 2 weeks of it healing and whatever I decide to do to it, then I do something else and I give it another 2 weeks. And I've followed this system to where I will top a plant after about 2 weeks of being in veg, then I'll super crop a plant, then I'll bend a plant over, and I seem to give them all these 2 week time frames. But I try to keep it under 2 months. If I'm playing around with experiments, I notice that the plant kind of seems to be big enough after about a month and a half of doing these 2 week intervals of playing with stuff. And then it goes into flower. And before I go into flower, I make sure everything's ready. I'll prune it. I'll make sure there's, I'll lollipop it. I'll have everything ready. Have it top dressed. Everything is like ready to go into flower. You can still do certain low stress training in flower. I don't recommend the high stress training stuff like super cropping or something that's like high stress, like breaking a limb or chopping off something, and it's going to take a while to heal. So I noticed I get better results when I do something to the plant and I give it 2 weeks to heal. Not in flower. This is only in veg. In flower, I want all that time to go strictly to making flowers.